I'm super excited today to have Charlie Dunn in our latest podcast series. We started this podcast last year by bringing in industry leaders, which has their domain expertise in different fields. We've worked in construction and construction technology for several decades, and we brought in amazing people. And now I'm happy to invite Charlie Dunn, our a dear friend and a leader in the industry in different verticals such as storytelling, lean construction, and visual planning. Charlie, welcome to our podcast.
Hey, Niran, good to reconnect. It's been a while.
It's been a while indeed. So I know that we've chatted a lot of times. You've given us some great feedback. I remember some of the great feedback you gave to our product team, which we've now incorporated into our product. And I want to talk, what is latest in your world? What is the latest that Charlie Dunn has been doing?
Well, since February, I've had this kind of interesting opportunity, particularly this my point in my career, to kind of become a beginner again, learning from an individual, Andrew Takamiya, who's at Mortenson. Prior to Mortenson, Andrew was spent some time with the healthcare network provider, and then before that was at Boeing. And in Boeing, he learned what he refers to as Kaizen from Mr. Nakao. Chihiro Nakao was early in his career a machinist at Toyota, became an executive, and then he launched the Shinkajutsu Institute with Toyota's blessing, which was Toyota's first ever attempt to spread globally what they developed. And so Andrew learned from him, and I'm learning from Andrew. And it's been a nice reset. It's been a grounding in some things I knew early in my career that with complexity and big project challenges, you kind of lose sight of. So anyway, it's been very, very good to come at this thing kind of with a beginner's mind and have a very kind of simple, narrow focus on principles of Kaizen.
Awesome. I'm glad that to hear that. Now you touched upon two really interesting things, and I want to expand a little bit more on that, right? You touched upon mentorship and you touched upon Kaizen, actually. So folks who do not know Kaizen, can you share a little bit more about the Kaizen philosophy?
Yes, they've probably heard of it as continuous improvement. Unfortunately, that language is probably a little soft for what was initially intended. Kai to tear down, to destroy, and then Zen to build back or to make better. Mm-hmm. But it's this sense that we have never arrived as individuals. Mm-hmm. A system has never arrived. A process has never arrived. There's always an opportunity to find a way to improve. And how do you go about improving? Tearing down and bringing back better.
That's such an interesting phase. So could I say that Charlie Dunn is bringing Zen?
That's an attempt. And when you met me, you may remember I had some crazy sketches on the wall, and I had a year. Is that 2022, yes. Actually? This is a warning where my theme for the year was Zen momentum. And if I remember right, we ate dinner in New York a couple of times. We talked about this Zen momentum, which led to a bike crash on a mountain. So the momentum. But it was a necessary thing for me. I think there was a pause. There was a resetting. And yes, sense of Zen I think we spend a lot of time, when we may circle back to this at the end, when we talk about technology, we spend a lot of time in construction with a lot of activity and not a lot of meaningful impact. So how do we find that path? How do we flow to the right activity, the right work?
Yeah.
And that's been another part of this time with Andrew, is it's given me, and I've thanked him for this renewed love for construction that I had even as a high school kid trying to make money painting houses. And then as I grew in my travels, loving architecture, but this sense of going to where the work is and having this appreciation and this desire to observe and not make judgment, but just observe the work itself. Not being pulled to meetings about the work, but no, the actual work where we create value at the point where physical reality changes and what once was is not anymore. What is now. You've heard me say this, it's a permanent way of storytelling. We transport people with architecture, design, and construction and change the world in a permanent way. So it's been refreshing from that sense as well.
Got it. Yeah. It's very interesting, and I have a smile on my face right now as I'm talking to Charlie, which is, I don't really usually hear Zen and Zen Buddhism and Zen philosophies in construction space. So this refreshing, thought you're bringing is so amazing, actually. And I want to touch more upon that by, you know, for allowing you to share more about the process of flow and how have you thought about flow. And you've been preaching about flow for recent, for quite a while right now. And I've read some of the books that you recommended me, like Stealing Fire. And can you tell more about flow and specifically in terms of flow, how does it apply to construction? Is it still just a very much of a, just a philosophy, or has it really been applied? And you have some examples where you have successfully applied in different, projects that you've worked on till now.
So to really answer this question, I think you need to get me that trip to Nepal we talked about and we never took. And then we'll have time
Correct.
to truly explore this. That being said, I am much more interested at the moment. Here's a book by Check Me High Flow, and this is about the
Yeah.
psychology of flow. So he was Polish,
Yeah.
studied a lot of World War II survivors, wrote the first psychological book titled Flow. And the interesting thing, and you'll immediately see the connection to one of the other things that I've been working on for construction and for visualizing and helping people see the work, creating time machines. So this is a broad summary. This is not an in-depth analysis of his work, but broad strokes, psychologically, 4 things are required for an individual to enter flow state. One, there must be focus. So you can't be everywhere all at once. You can't have a broad focus. You have to have a narrow focus on a specific task. 2, you've got to have freedom. And this is where kind of the spirit of Zen, this, removing the fear of failure. So your freedom from fear of failure, removing, any sense that you're not good enough. So this often in our society, this, sense that we're not ready for the job, but providing everything to be free so we know our job. An analogy to this are oftentimes people who enter into flow state are athletes. So you talk about being in the zone. So that's another way to talk about this freedom, that you're in the zone. Anyway, you're able to perform freely. Part of this comes in when we talk about psychological safety. So focus, freedom, and then feedback. You need real-time feedback that you're doing the right thing.
Yes.
There's an immediate confirmation. You're able to see and to sense. And again, this is where things that talk about rafting, or talk about hiking, or you talk about any endeavor that gives you that sense of feedback. So those are the main 3, and then there's kind of a 4th that it takes a little bit to wrestle with, keeping with the F's. We'll call it 4%. But so to Mihai, he said that flow happens between boredom and frustration. So 4% is that effort to say, hey, we're trying to get better, but not so much better that we're frustrated and we think it's impossible. But we're setting an achievable target to get better every time out. We're never going to show up and just say, okay, we're good enough. And this is, no, there's always, and that's why athletes are perhaps more familiar with flow. Musicians understand this idea of flow. So in our industry, those psychological aspects of flow are much more interesting to me than a lot of the technical, what can we learn from manufacturing conversations about flow, because taking care of those psychological barriers, I think, will naturally take care of the technical barriers, and at the same time create this emphasis on the individual, on the human being, who's ultimately able to do the creative work we need in the built environment.
Thank you for laying that out. So it basically, you're outlining that there's a focus, there's a freedom, and there is a feedback loop, right? In this whole world of where there is so much multitasking and people are constantly getting distracted with all the gadgets and phones, how do you maintain focus? Freedom, I believe, freedom is something that you can achieve by, it's something that you can meditate upon and you can build that, right? There's a deeper thing in there, and also feedback, right? How do you get the feedback as well? And again, I'm going to go to the whole questions about how do we apply this to construction. And I know that you have stories that, around it, but let's talk about how do you maintain focus when there's so much distractions?
The simple answer is smaller batch. And so now I am borrowing a little bit from the manufacturing language of small batch versus large batch. But for us, that means you don't define and look at work in a weekly target or a monthly target. It's a daily target. As in you get into this, you understand that daily target becomes hourly targets. And with that hour, you
Yeah.
begin to have work steps and work packages so that you know in real time, yes or no, you're meeting the target. So that narrower focus, and then the other thing that does, that sets you up for the feedback so that you're getting feedback minimum daily,
Yeah.
better. And we went through this back in 2020 where I was like, hey, can we see things every 2 hours about where people are
Yeah.
rather
Yeah.
than at the end of a week, we roughly were sort of like this, which is absurd. We never get better from that. We don't have the data necessary to get better at the level of detail to understand what happened. So another way to describe this, and now we'll move into some things, learning from what Toyota was really after, you need to be able to see normal versus abnormal. And to see normal versus abnormal, you need to have a narrow enough focus on what the work was supposed to be to know you're normal, you're doing what the standard expected is for that work, or you're abnormal. For some reason, you're not doing the standard. And now there's a reason to do Kaizen and to improve.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the example that you gave, which is breaking things down in smaller pieces. I was reading about and listening to some podcasts about Anthropic, the big, massive AI company that is right now on the path to, become one of the largest generative AI company. And there's a whole race towards AGI, right? Which is artificial general intelligence, they call it, where there's a talk about, is it AGI going to be dangerous to society, and when are you going to get to AGI? And also, what does AGI actually mean, right? And very interesting topic that I was listening to last week was there is a slightly different conversation around AGI right now, which is earlier people used to say one AI agent will be able to do everything, from being able to read a document to being able to generate a report to being able to do robotic process and everything. And it was one agent being able to do everything was what they were looking at as an AGI. But recently there's a conversation that it's no longer that one agent is able to do everything. Now the conversation is around there are multiple smaller AGIs that are able to do smaller pieces of work, but there's a way to connect these pieces together into a single platform, actually, or in a singularity. So you'll have an agent that can do recognition of a PPE hard hat, or one agent can do a daily reporting, or one agent can do robotics for cleaning the room, like Roomba. But you put it all together, and that's what the AGI becomes like. And I was thinking about this when you were talking about this breaking things into smaller pieces, so it's more measurable. It is something that at the minutest level, is resonating at the level of Zen or Kaizen as well, and construction as well, or as well as AI. So it seems like there's a common thread between all of these things together, actually, right? So Charlie, tell me about, on your experiences of how and where has these state of flow in the chaos of construction. How do we achieve the state of flow? I mean, that's a bigger question.
So a couple of threads to connect here. How in this day of all the seeming chaos that comes at us do we get to focus? I think
Yeah.
there's a chance with AI for AI to allow this to happen, for AI to remove some of the drudgery, some of the inhumane work, so that human beings are then freed to focus on the creative work where we excel, where we naturally get to flow state. So connecting those two things, I see AI being complementary to a human ability to achieve flow state. The second thing is you mentioned that some of what I talked about with flow state sounds like it might fit with AI development and how it matures. Flow state, one of the things I love about it is it's universal. I see the
Yeah.
application for construction. Mihai saw it for psychology, jazz, and other musicians see it clearly for musical excellence. It
Yeah.
exists universally anywhere human creativity is working. So it would naturally fit to analog legacy software development models. It's funny that I use the word analog to describe software before AI, but then as well as current and modern AI. So there's there's certainly that. The challenge fundamentally I see right now in construction is this. One, I give a two-part answer. as to why I don't know that we are yet going to gain significantly from AI short term. Long term, no doubt. And in certain narrow niches, we're already seeing some short term benefit. But one is we have not had the discipline to define standard work so that we can know normal versus abnormal, so that we can do Kaizen or do improvement. We have been quite literally chasing new things, hoping that we will get better without having documented, have the discipline to know what is the actual current way of working. And until we have that discipline, even with AI, we risk, if you studied system thinking, pushing the wrong lever and getting unintended consequences. So that's one. Fundamentally, we have to do what the Toyota way teaches, and that is understand with discipline the current standard way of working, and then intentionally test the new thing against the current standard to see if that's an improvement, and then that new thing becomes a standard. It's a simple image of rolling a rock up a hill. As you get up the hill, you want to create some shelves, some carve outs so that you keep the rock going up the hill. You don't go all the way up and come all the way back down. And in construction, we've been that imagery of the rock goes up the hill and comes back down, and we don't know where we are. And if we're going up or down, we just keep trying new stuff. So that's one, that fundamental discipline of standard work. And then two, I believe we've always had a problem of working to make things easier, better, faster, cheaper. Come back to those four later, perhaps in the conversation. But without stopping first to ask the very serious question, should we even be doing this? So prior to AI, that was a concern I had. A lot of tech companies, a lot of tech startups, a lot of internal teams were working to take something and make it easier or better or faster or cheaper, when that thing, we actually could have stopped doing it entirely. We should go farther upstream. We should get more at the source of the problem. We should quit fixing Band-Aids faster, and we should find ways to stop inflicting wounds. And so in an age of AI, what do we risk? We're now going to turn loose the AI, and we're going to make this thing even easier, better, faster, cheaper, that we should not even be doing in the first place. And AI can't help us with that. As we tell it to make something better, it can't say, hey, but why are you doing this? Right? It's going to try to make it better. So those two fundamentals, I think we have to resolve before we'll really lean into some accelerated benefit from AI.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. We've been talking about standardization. We've been talking about creating this baseline and benchmarks. With all the digitization that we have right now, like with all the softwares that we use, it's possible that we can say that we have standardized a few things, right? But I guess the argument here is that although we've standardized, there are still every company, even within a company, every project or every geography will operate in such a fundamentally different way based upon, I don't know, various different parameters. Like, that there are still no standardized way to measure what we did previously. Is it better and worse than before? Because I faced it currently in a lot of case studies we do. We're generating a lot of case studies right now with all of our customers right now. And one of the key ways to generate ROI and prove the value is to look into benchmark and say, what were you doing before Kwant was there, and what Kwant brought in actually? Is it increase in productivity by X number of percentages, or is it increase in safety, or increase in compliance and money saving, and we do that. But in many cases we've struggled, what were you guys doing before Kwant? There's no real quantification over there, so we have to really dig deeper and create some assumptions over there, and kind of come up with that ROI factor. And it's a very interesting piece. I think this is a much deeper topic, and I know that Nathan Wood and I think CPC, has tried to standardize a lot of things. But this is something that is a pretty big challenge, and I don't know if anybody could solve this actually, the standardization problem, Charlie.
Yeah, well, if I understand correctly, and again, we haven't connected in a while, I will be curious as we have time to understand where Quant's grown. But from the conversations last fall with McKinsey, I hope she's still doing well. Industries that are better with data Yeah, industries that are better with data, you've seen some uptake in things like Quant because they have the data to understand and immediately be able to make that decision. And also, I think you're experiencing a much clearer line of sight on why they're making a decision. Where you've kind of had this, when I first met you, even before it was Quant, you had this broad scatter shot. Hey, here's all the things we might do for you. Do you want to do you want to try it? Versus you get into more mature industry, better with data. They say, okay, we're going to do it for this one thing, right? It's going to be safety, or it's going to be these two things, safety and onboarding, right? There's a very clear decision-making process, a value proposition, and understanding how you make these decisions.
Yeah.
That helps. Yes.
Yeah. I want to talk about that, you know, in a context. So we can talk about this whole. I actually also want to touch a little bit about the thing you said earlier about, if AI is just repeating what was done previously, then the AI is not going to help because as of now, generative AI cannot come up with new ideas. Like, it's only feeding upon the ideas already exist. So it really cannot come up with a new innovation, by the way. Like, and I don't know if you've tried it, but I've tried it many times. It is such a if it's always reinforcing your own ideas. It will never kind of challenge, a different way. And I understand that, and that will be wrong direction to go because, as you mentioned, like, we now sometimes have to go to that first principle thinking about, like, does change order doesn't even need to exist, or does RFI even need to exist actually, like, or is critical path, a default way to do a business actually. And I think that in many ways, AI might not be the perfect answer, but I understand that, like, you mentioned that, yes, in a more philosophical way, it will free up most of our time that we can focus on high value things that gets us into the flow instead, right?
I know you said it was too much theory, but I'm going to go to a different story from Alaska last week. For those of you guys who missed our prep conversation, I just spent a week fishing in Alaska and then at Sitka Jazz Festival with the arguably greatest jazz drummer all time, Bernard Purdie, and one of the best jazz alto sax, Cleve Guyton, and could go on and on about flow and jazz. But
Amazing.
the fishing trip, the guy who organized it, David Umstadt, had been with Bechtel early in his career, then worked on the owner's side. And while on the owner's side, he stumped me on the boat. He said, how many change orders do you think I signed in 10 years? And what was the impact to my life? Like, how much of my life did I spend looking at change orders? I didn't know. I was way low on my guess because I thought somehow that the change orders would have been rolled up to him as kind of like a bulk change order. But it turns out their process, he
Yeah.
actually had to see every single change order. 10 years, he was like 8,000 change orders.
Yeah.
So the amount of
That's
his
like
time
about
every
900.
week just looking at change orders, right? So should we make the change order process better, or should we go to a new delivery model that eliminates the need for almost all change orders? These are serious questions we should be struggling with if all we do is launch AI at making what we do currently better. A great example of what we'll get some of the disasters we've had with trying to do prefabrication in construction. Right?
Yeah.
We take some of the principles, not all, some of the principles of manufacturing, or I don't even say principles, it's the wrong
Yeah.
word. We take some of the tools of manufacturing and we throw those tools at traditional construction. We don't reinvent construction for manufacturing. We just throw the tools, and what happens? We lose more money faster
Yeah.
because we're using tools on a bad process. And that process, as it scales up, we introduce WIP, which creates space problems, logistics problems, and schedule problems. And we create more WIP faster, and WIP in any system means your time is longer. So we could go on and on here, but I think the point's clear. There are some
Yeah.
fundamental reckoning with what should we or should we not be doing
Yeah.
before we take off trying to do it better.
Yeah. I wanna, so because you asked me about Quant and what we're doing and how we're doing and what the recent things are, I wanna actually talk about in the context of different industries. And, you know, um, we've seen amazing growth of Quant. We're gonna we're having an amazing hockey stick growth. And while we're proving this ROIs and how much Kwant can save, right? Which is okay. Are we saving time? Are we saving
Can
money?
I
Are we
unpack
saving
that just a little
lives?
bit? So if you slice that hockey stick, how much of it is repeat major enterprise customers?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the majority repeat customers, or are you seeing a majority uptake in new customers?
I want to share that in later on, but it's
Okay,
amazing number of
I'm gonna
repeat
remember the answer. So
customers.
good answer. But then let me ask a different way. Are you seeing the uptake in specific industries? So is it more industrial construction, oil, gas,
Yes. So we,
manufacturing,
yeah,
automotive? Yeah.
exactly. I was gonna say, yeah. So we focus on four or five verticals, like, but one is data center, which, we're all seeing an uptick on right now, right? And the data center has its own uniqueness. So that's one. The second one is manufacturing with the whole, we've got some strong partnership with the owners. And then on the other hand, we've seen oil and gas. And lastly, one will be like, more infrastructure like aviation as well as multifamily, like those are the four verticals that I've seen growth on, and four or five, like because based on how we differentiate aviation and multifamily, right? So and it's these are the industries that are growing. That these are, and I will also like can share a little bit more, like there's a lot of ownership and owners who are appreciating technology more because there is a lot of at stake with these owners. Like, when somebody's building a data center, they have high stakes on getting this built as soon as possible. The contracts are like the data centers have their own construction management team, or like they're not hiring a owner's rep firm. They're doing this all by themselves. They really want to understand the data about schedule, processes, costs. And it might be that they just want to have a visibility because they have a high risk, or it's possible that they're doing this because in the future they want to do this by themselves, right? Because we've seen success in that, we've seen failures in that as well. Like Tesla, however, like if you look at Tesla, Tesla builds their own structures, right? I know I've worked with a couple of owners who build their own construction arm and build their own things, right? There's been successes, there has been failures, but I think that that's where the trend is right now, right? And so the key, and I'm gonna go into your experience as well about, because you've worked in different industries like industrial and nuclear as well. The way I see it is that in 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 these industrial projects, especially in oil and gas, and there's a lot of interest in the profitability and measuring actually, because the stakes are very high. These are massive projects because 1 or 2% increase in productivity, or 1 or 2% lowering their safety, safety scale, or increasing their safety can have a massive impact, right? So we've seen a lot in there. There is a little more of a measurable impact we're having over there. Like, the project team is engaged with us more to measure the impact. Like, okay, before Kwant, we had 35% production time or tool time or wrench time. Now with Kwant, we're looking to see 5% increase. Like, there's a measurable metrics that we have right now in this industrial setting. Meanwhile, I know that DPR tried it, and we work with our favorite, Ankur. I still don't see construction going for that. Like, and I want to talk more about that, Charlie. Like, how do we make this more measurable, and what is your experience from working in all the different industries?
Yes. So yeah, I was smiling because you said wrench time, and in most general construction settings, wrench time is not something you'll ever hear discussed.
Correct.
Part of it is how work is contracted. The owner to the general contractor to trade partner. Even trade partners may have a project management arm, and then they may subcontract their labor to a labor arm. So you have a lot more layers than an EPC.
Yeah.
The other reason I smile is I had learned about value added time in manufacturing, came to the nuclear industry
Yeah.
and asked this question about wrench time. And the nuclear industry, they did not look favorably on wrench time, but for another reason. Their highest priority was safety, then second highest was quality. So, they would kind of almost frown on too much focus on something like wrench time as creating a risk in a system. But we got to that place where we could also understand through the use of visual management, time machine, 4D, how to
Yeah.
improve the opportunity for people to do work. safely, of the right quality, even perhaps better, or arguably better safety, better quality. So they're not exclusive. But yes, it makes perfect sense. People who understand and have data on individual labor and by trade labor productivity are going to be interested in enhancing that, getting better insight, and then to have at least some sense that they know how to leverage the data, action from the data.
Yeah. I think I want to touch upon the whole safety and productivity, like balancing that out. So we totally believe in the philosophy, like wrench time is not the only way to measure it. Um, the we check on fatigue levels, like what's how much work overtime is going on, what is the heat level stress, what is the environmental stress, and all that. Like so that kind of all aligns together to give you a score of like okay, how the project is going so far, how is the workforce health, and what is the what are the key risks on the project. But Charlie, tell me about like in your experience on how different markets experience like or evaluate these things, like and is the core one of the key problems that we have in the construction industry is the fact that there are this many layers before the real worker actually hits the hits the wrench actually, like because I've gone to these job sites and I saw there was a electrical contractor name that I'm contracting with, but that massive electrical contractor, $1 billion or $2 billion revenue contractor, has a two-layer down, that they're contracting to get the work done actually. And so, do you think that, but unlike EPC, where it's a one or only one layer down, like is that one of the things that we see as a problem?
All right. Apparently, Theodore liked that question, or
Great.
somebody running by he wasn't expected. Theodore, just so you know, he's wearing his Carnegie Hall hoodie today.
Oh,
He
nice.
likes his red Carnegie Hall hoodie. And trivia question: if anybody recognizes where that poster's from, we should give them something. So I'm just going to leave that out there.
Sure.
Yes, there's. I guess I'll talk to the same opportunity I've seen coming for quite a while. I even saw it
Yeah.
2015, 2016 in the nuclear industry. We've been on this path, and now the path has landed. We have run out of unlimited, abundant, cheap labor. And we have also now begun to hit the wall on relatively, inexpensive material supplies. Those two scarcities, I think, are going to create the action that you thought might have naturally happened with something like Kwant, where people are going to want to understand labor patterns in a better way. The
Yeah.
way we're having to find labor, and you mentioned data centers, power utilities, water treatment, those three are all going to be in a fight for labor. It's not the first time we've had this in the industry. Semiconductors had that for a brief period with welding. But the fight this time for labor is going to be across the board. And that labor scarcity is going to drive much better management and tracking efficiency. I don't know if that's the correct phrasing, but this passing it on to somebody else and it's their problem because we contracted them to deal with it, that's going to come to an
Yeah.
end. And the better enterprise owners have already been on this path for a while. Those were the owners that were investing in things like offsite and industrial strategy, like creating products, like partnering with manufacturing partners,
Yeah.
and exploring technologies that could improve their job sites.
Yeah. And I think that you've also worked with companies that have built their in-house manufacturing arm, or they have a strong presence of in-house workforce. They self-perform a lot of work because they have a better visibility and control, and even better profits in that, right? And I think that that's the real craftsmanship. That's where we can potentially see more gains in productivity and also in safety in the future. Yeah.
Yes, you mentioned safety in the future. There's another element there, and some of the sensorability you have could play into this, but shifting safety from some very good efforts that have moved us up from where we were, 50s to 70s to some improvements in the 80s and big gains in the 90s, 2000s. But now looking at beyond just safety as the physical functions of safety, but safety as human performance. And how does mental health, how do things like flow state and psychological safety play into overall job site safety? Those predictive factors, congestion,
Yeah.
heat, complexity of task, all these things that we'll begin to understand. Yeah, it's an exciting time. I'm still an optimist. Like I still say, in our generation, how we produce and how we consume power is going to change, and how we deliver major projects is going to change. And we're in the middle of that transition now.
Yeah. And our industry is such an exciting phase because our industry basically lays the foundation for the construction of these major projects, including power generation and data storage or data processing. And then also, I think there's also a chance to and how do we operate these facilities, right? So yeah, I think it's exciting time for our industry. So going back to the flow state again, Charlie, right? Which is how does the worker, an electrician or a welding guy, get into a flow state, right? What are the tools that he needs or he does not need to bring that to a flow state, and how do we empower him to get his craftsmanship out of him actually?
Well, I think the interesting thing is I think the kind of the front line, the field, the people who actually create the physical value in the industry are closest to achieving flow state. You eliminate things like paperwork that doesn't make sense, the frustration of finding design documentation, get rid of wasted travel to go get materials, right? All the basics, take care of that so that they show up knowing, okay, I have my tools, I have the intended design, I have all the correct support equipment, and this is my target for today. And they're able to hit that target and go home knowing they hit the target. And then by hitting that target, they're contributing to an overall flow that gets to a successful project. That gives them the shot to get to flow state. I know from time in nuclear, before that time in manufacturing, one of the first things you have to get rid of is unnecessary interruptions. There's a lot of management that has to learn this. And this has been something I've seen that has some benefit of technology, even as we're still not quite leveraging the data, but at least if we can create real-time or near real-time quantity dashboards so that management understands, yes or no, we're normal or abnormal. I had a project manager that I'm not sure if you met him there in New Jersey, but he made this statement. He said, hey, because of this dashboard, it probably saved an hour of my time a day and then probably an hour to 2 hours of these different trade partners' time because I wasn't going out to the field to bother them to make sure they were on pace or not. I could see it. I trusted we were, and I went on and did my other work. So that's a very good example of how with technology lets people see the work the same way, remove those interruptions, those barriers to flow for the people actually doing the work.
I love this concept so much actually, being, and this is not just in or the craft workers, but also in our day-to-day work in any field, right? Being able to reduce interruptions, being able to understand what the key goals are and KPIs are, and let the trust guide the ship and make it real time using technology to get the feedback so that it's not about interruption, it's more about trust and understanding. And I really like that idea. I think that different companies have already started looking into this. I know I talk to a lot of the companies, and a lot of our customers have some of these approaches. Although the data is not fully there, because there's only digitization of a certain amount of data. But if somebody could bring that together, and we're trying to do that, where how can we bring that data from cameras? How can we do that from sensors or documents and all that pieces together, one place? I think that the worker can really go to the flow state. So I was imagining when you were saying that, a welder versus a jazz drummer, actually, right? And how can we compare? I mean, both are one is a musician, one is a craftsman, but it's almost like it is something that we've kind of forgotten to admire the welder recently, and we admire the drummer so much. I guess we are the ones who admire drummers. I'm sure there are other people who do not admire the drummers, but that's a separate topic. But a craftsman's craft of being able to let himself go in that art will be an amazing place to be actually. Yeah.
And gentle nudge, if part 2 we happen to decide to do in Nepal, all the better.
Yeah.
Or in New York City,
Sounds
or somewhere we're in the same
Yeah.
room, because that is continued since you first met me.
We will plan a trip together soon, and we will do this in person in part 2.
All right. So good
Charlie
to catch
Dunn,
up.
thank you so much for your time.
All right.
Have a great day, man. It was great.